Today on Sports Central, we go over our next team projection of this offseason, and it's here over the UCLA Bruins, a team that went 3-4 overall in the 2020 season. Not a terrible season for UCLA, but how will this team be in 2021 is what we're going over here today. We're going to go over a few players that UCLA will be losing, who they'll be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with their previous 6 games for last year, which UCLA, this team played 7 games, which in a Pac-12 conference that was ridden by COVID outings. This team actually had a decent season playing 7 games. Like, there were a couple of teams in the Pac-12 last year who only played 2 to 3 games over the course of the season. So for UCLA, not a terrible season in games-wise. This team did get some good action in, and they also had a couple of good wins. This team beat California 34-10, beat Arizona 27-10, also beat Arizona State 25-18. So this team played pretty well in their wins. This team kept it really close, though, with a lot of good teams, like Oregon and USC especially. Both of those teams were outstanding last year. They lost by 3 to Oregon. This team just could not finish out that game against the Ducks. And then USC, of course, was also close. 138-43 was the final score there. And you also could argue that with that Stanford matchup, they lost to Stanford by 1, 47-48. So this team, even though they're 3-4, I think this team really, they did have potential to be a 5 or 6 win team last season. They were 3-4, but this team easily could have been 5-2 or even 6-1 if they could have just finished out those games. Once again, when you lose to Oregon by 3, USC by 5, and then Stanford by 1, you're keeping all those games really close. You just are not finishing them there, and that's the main problem for UCLA. But looking at your first 3 games, you were 1-2. Last 4 games, you were 2-2. So overall, once again, not a terrible season for UCLA. There was some improvement that did happen over the course of a season for a lot of players, which, looking at your returning production going into next season, this is your roster preview. This team's got some good potential going into next season. Dorian Thompson-Robinson's coming back. He was your starting quarterback, obviously, DTR. Had a good season last year, putting up just over 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, also at a 65% completion rate. So, DTR last season, anything over a 63% completion rate is good for any quarterback, and DTR was 2% over that. He exceeded that. So, not a terrible season for him. Watch out for him next season. He's definitely going to be an impact player in that Pac-12 conference next year. Demetric Felton is not going to be back. He was their top running back last year. Looking at him, he put up just over 800 yards of total offense, 8 touchdowns as well. So I'd say that's definitely going to be your toughest loss on this team next season. That's definitely going to take a little bit of adjusting. But your second running back, Brown, he's coming back. Put up just over 600 yards last year, so he's going to get a lot of action, I can guarantee you, next year, especially if he stays healthy. Greg Dulcich is coming back. He was your top tight end, or he was your tight end and your top receiver last year, so he was a huge impact player for this team, putting up just over 500 yards, which is outstanding out of a tight end, especially considering, this team only played 7 games, and he put up over 500 yards in 7 games. That's pretty impressive out of any tight end. And so for him, watch out for him next year. He's going to be a big impact player for the Bruins. Kyle Phillips is coming back. Dylan Hurd is also coming back. They were your top 2 wide receivers last year, so definitely watch out for both of them. All around, the skill players positions are really good for UCLA next season. Once again, you are losing your top running back there, but Brown, I think, should do just as fine of a job as he did in the returning production category. But looking at the rest of the offensive line, you lose one on there. You lose one offensive lineman, one in the secondary as well. So good returning production for this team. On both sides of the ball, this team has got a lot of potential. It's just a matter of whether or not this team can finish games. Like, once again, if you look at last season, that was their main issue is they were pretty close to a lot of opponents. They just could not finish out the game. So, once again, great return production for UCLA. It's just a matter of how this team does in the long run. But potential Pac-12 dark horse, I definitely think is a potential possibility for UCLA. If you look at, once again, return production explains itself. When you have your star tight end coming back, you got your starting quarterback also coming back. That's going to be huge for this team. Like, DTR's got several weapons for next season. He's got a lot to work with. This team has got a lot of potential next year, and really, you can say that about a lot of Pac-12 teams, but especially UCLA. This team does look really good to me next season. I like how this team is looking and shaping out to be for next year. But chances of a bowl game in 2021, I'd say, are really good for UCLA. 6 wins, I definitely say, is a possibility for this team. It's just a matter of how far this team can go past that. But looking at your schedule for next year, you got kind of a tough schedule here. Start off the season against Hawaii. They did make it to a bowl game last year, but that I'd say should be an easier game there otherwise. LSU is obviously going to be a tough one. LSU, I know that they didn't have a very good 2020 season, but that team is going to be right back to being a contender next year, so watch out for them. Fresno State's going to be an easy win, so in your first 3 games, you should get 2 wins at least. Then you got Stanford, of course, on the road, Arizona State at home, Arizona then on the road. So those are your first 6 games. Really, the first 6 games, you should have 4 wins at least out of that. 4 to 5 wins is definitely reasonable, but the second half of your schedule is that's where things are going to get kind of tough for this team. You got Washington and Oregon in back-to-back games there. Both of those teams will probably be your leaders in the Pac-12 North next season. Utah, then you got them on the road. You got Colorado as well. Both of those teams will be good. USC is going to be good. So yeah, all 5 of those games, you got pretty tough games there in between October and November there. And then you got California to finish out the season. So, if you can get 4 to 5 wins in your first 6 games, you'll be in good shape for a bowl game. But, if you, say, get 2 to 3 wins in your first 6 games, that's going to be pretty tough to scrape together another 3 wins to make it to a bowl game in your last 6 games. So, do be aware of that for next season. You're really going to want to get those wins early on next year if you're wanting to make it to a bowl game. But if you want to go past that, you got to get 5 wins in those first 6 games for sure if you want to make it, say, to 7 or 8 wins. But looking at the first half here, Hawaii, that's going to be a win. I consider maybe making that a yellow game, but I'm going to keep it as a green just because it's at home for UCLA. LSU is going to be a close one. I'm not sure who I think is going to win that one there. Probably I'd probably say LSU just because for them, they've got a ton of returning production. That team's going to be a lot more experienced next season as they were in 2020. But that should be an interesting matchup there for sure. Fresno State's going to be a win. Stanford and Arizona State are both going to be close ones. Arizona should be a win as well. So I'm giving you 3 guaranteed wins in your first 6 games, but once again, I would expect 4 to 5 wins out of your first 6 for the Bruins. But looking at the second half of your schedule, then you got Washington on the road. All 6 of these games are going to be close ones. I'm not going to predict any guaranteed wins or losses in these last 6 just because of how close the skill level is between all those teams and UCLA. Washington's going to be a close one. Oregon, Utah, Colorado, all going to be tough. Same thing with USC, California. So, it's going to be a tough last 6 games there. And really, this team could either win 5 of those 6 or 1 of those 6, and I would not be surprised. Once again, it's just a matter of how you do in those first 6 games. Once again, if you're going to make it to a bowl game, the key is winning at least 4 to 5 games in those first 6. If you don't do that, it's going to be pretty tough for you to get up to 6. But projection will be 7-5 for UCLA. So I've got you going just a little bit past the bowl threshold there. 7-5 is going to be your projection. 9-3 will be your ceiling. So that's going to be kind of the top of where you could be. 5-7 is going to be the worst that you can be for next season. So the probability for UCLA to get to a bowl game is actually pretty high out of me for next season. There still is that little chance that they don't make it, but I'd say it's pretty favorable for this team next season. I really like the talent on this team. DTR, all of it looks pretty good. So watch out for this team next season for sure. But that being said, wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed this preview, slap a like on it, subscribe as well, as it really helps with the channel, and I really appreciate that. But once again, stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you guys later.